Chapter 1, Part 3, Attachment Strikes, When Love Freezes Action, Scenes from 126-138. The battlefield had been loud. Trumpets, conches, and war cries had shaken the sky, and yet, in that thunder, a silence grew inside Arjuna. In the last part, we saw him ask Krishna to place his chariot between the two armies, not just to see warriors, but to face his own truth. And now, the curtain lifts on the most fragile moment of the mighty Pandava's life. As Krishna steered the chariot into the very heart of the battlefield, dust swirled around them like restless spirits. On one side stood his brothers, sons of Pandu, armored in righteousness. On the other, his cousins, the Kauravas, armored in greed and arrogance. But Arjuna's eyes were not looking at sides anymore. They were searching for faces, and he found them. First, Bhishma, the grandsire, the pillar of the Kuru dynasty, the man who had once held little Arjuna on his lap and blessed him. His beard was now white, but his bow was still steady. Then Drona, his teacher, his guru, the one who had shaped his very hands to draw the bowstring, the one who had whispered the secrets of archery into his ears. How could Arjuna raise his arrows against that voice? His gaze swept further. Cousins who had played with him in childhood now stood as enemies. Uncles, elders, even friends who had once shared meals at the same table now held weapons pointed at his chest. He saw sons, nephews, brothers-in-law, a web of relationships stretching across the battlefield like threads of fate. Each face was a memory, each armor a wound. In that moment, Arjuna was no longer a warrior. He was a son, a disciple, a cousin, a brother. His bow was still in his hand, but his heart was slipping away. This is the moment where the Mahabharata stops being a story of kings and kingdoms and becomes the story of every human heart. Because who among us has not stood in such a place? Not on a battlefield of swords and arrows, but at the crossroads of love and duty. Think about it. Have you ever faced a choice where your responsibility pointed one way and your heart pulled you the other? A decision where winning would mean losing someone you love? Where success felt like betrayal? That was Arjuna's battlefield. That is ours too. The Gita calls this moha, attachment, the binding force of affection that clouds clarity. And here, in these verses, we watch it grip even the strongest of men. Krishna did not speak yet. He only drove the chariot forward, silently, allowing Arjuna to see, to feel, to drown in the flood of his own emotions. Because sometimes, before wisdom can enter, love must first break you. The battlefield that had once echoed with noise now began to echo with Arjuna's heartbeats. The Gandiva bow, his pride, began to tremble in his grasp. His breath grew heavy, his vision blurred. His arguments, his excuses, his despair, all of it began here. This is the threshold of collapse. This is where attachment strikes. Scene 1.26, Chariot of Destiny halts. Scene. Krishna guides the white horses into the open throat of the battlefield and brings the chariot to a deliberate stop, dead center. Dust hangs like a veil. The thunder of conches fades to a ringing stillness. Arjuna stands between two oceans, duty on one side, love on the other. The pause feels heavier than steel. Then, Barbaric, the unseen witness, would later say the war truly began here, not with arrows, but with a halt. Krishna's mastery is quiet. He does not argue. He positions. He grants Arjuna the most sacred vantage, the middle, where excuses cannot hide and every bond is visible. Now, life does this to us. A project, a crisis, a family decision places us squarely in between, where there is no safe angle and no flattering filter. Emails, opinions, and noise recede. You see the people, the stakes, the consequences. Clarity is brutal, but merciful. Focus. When life stops your chariot in the center, don't flinch. Breathe, look, name what you see. Choices made from the middle become anchor points for the future. Scene 1.27, Faces in the fog. Scene. Armor blurs into memories. Arjuna scans the lines and the battlefield becomes a family album. Bhishma's blessing hand, Drona's patient voice, cousins from childhood games now gripping spears. Weapons stay sharp, but the heart softens. Then, through Barbaric's eyes, kinship sours into conflict. What others call enemies, Arjuna sees as relationships braided through decades. That is why his breath shortens. War, once abstract, becomes intimate. He isn't facing numbers, he is facing names. Now, we know this place. The colleague is also a mentor. The stakeholder is also a friend. Identity layers stack until decisions freeze. When role dissolves into relationship, judgment fogs, you negotiate with your own past. Focus. Separate lenses before you decide. First, see the role: general, manager, trustee. Then, honor the relationship: teacher, friend, cousin. Hold both, but let the role guide the action and the relationship guide the tone. Scene 128, Draupadi's silent stake. Scene. She is not on the front line, yet her presence fills the air. Draupadi, the wronged queen whose disrobing scarred the kingdom, watches from behind the ranks. For her, those relatives across the field are not abstractions. They are architects of humiliation. Then, Arjuna's compassion collides with Draupadi's justice. Krishna says nothing, but the silence asks, compassion for whom and at whose cost? Barbaric would say the war has more witnesses than warriors. Their griefs weigh the scales. Now, every decision has silent stakeholders, people who will be affected whether or not they sit at the table. Sometimes our kindness to the visible becomes cruelty to the unseen. Inaction can be violence dressed as gentleness. Focus. Before you retreat in the name of compassion, list who benefits and who bleeds if you do nothing. Mercy must include the injured, not only the familiar. Scene 1.29, the weight of kinship. Scene. Arjuna's voice cracks as he names them aloud. Fathers, grandfathers, teachers, uncles, brothers, sons. Each word adds iron to his bow arm. Naming turns an army into a household. Every arrow now feels like betrayal. Then, the enumeration is not rhetoric. It is collapse. By reciting ties, Arjuna stitches his heart to both sides. Krishna lets him speak. Truth must empty itself before wisdom can enter. The Gandiva grows heavy because language has loaded it with love. Now, we also self-bind with sentences. He's family. She helped me. We go way back. Loyalty is noble until it blinds. When every tie is equal, action becomes impossible, and injustice thrives inside our politeness. Focus. Write two lists: duties owed and duties due. Keep love for all, but responsibility to the right. Kinship is sacred. Clarity is too. Scene 1.30, Abhimanyu's unseen eyes. Scene. Arjuna's son is not in this frame, yet his shadow stands beside the chariot. Abhimanyu, the bright arc of youth, learned courage by watching his father stand tall. What will he learn if the hero trembles and retreats? Then, through Krishna's steady gaze, legacy enters the scene. Battles are fought by the present, but inherited by the future. Barbaric would note, a father's hesitation becomes a son's horizon. Arjuna isn't choosing only for himself. Now, those who look up to you, children, juniors, teams, take their cues from your posture, not your speeches. Your pause can be wise, your fear can be honest, but your final stance teaches them how to meet their Kurukshetra. Focus. Act as if someone you love will copy your courage, because they will. Let your decision expand their future, not shrink it. Scene 131, the collapse of resolve. Scene. Arjuna steadies himself, but the vision shatters again. He sees omens, shadows across the sun, trembling limbs, parched lips. His warrior's body, once tuned to precision, now betrays him. A bow becomes burden. Resolve begins to leak like water from a cracked pot. Then, to the watching Barbaric, this is astonishing. The invincible archer, vanquisher of gods, survivor of flames, now trembles not before weapons, but before memories. In the Mahabharata, this is the moment when Shaurya, valor, collapses under sneha, affection. It teaches that true battles aren't always against spears, but against the heart's knots. Now, many of us know this paralysis. At work, in family, in community, we freeze not because of incompetence, but because consequences feel too personal. The doctor hesitates before a relative's surgery, the judge before a friend's trial, the manager before a friend's termination. Expertise shakes under intimacy. Focus. Recognize that hesitation is not weakness. It is humanity. But humanity without clarity breeds ruin. Step back. Separate your capacity from your condition. You may be trembling now, but your skill remains intact. Return to it with perspective. Scene 132, Kingdoms in ashes. Scene. Arjuna lifts his voice higher. What joy is a kingdom if it rises from the ashes of kin? Gold-plated thrones dissolve into funeral pyres in his imagination. He sees victory itself as poison, sweet on the tongue, burning in the veins. Then, here lies the paradox of Dharma. Kingship was Arjuna's duty, yet the price of duty is despair. Bharbrik would later recount that even the promise of ruling the world could not seduce Arjuna when weighed against love. It shows the Mahabharata's depth. Duty and desire do not always walk hand in hand. Now, we too chase kingdoms, promotions, influence, wealth. Yet when we realize the cost, relationships strained, health eroded, conscience compromised, the victory feels hollow. How many leaders discover at the summit that the throne is lonely and the banquet tasteless? Focus. Before chasing a crown, measure the ashes it may leave. A true kingdom is not built on corpses, but on values. If success kills your peace, you are carrying a pyre, not a throne. Scene 133, The Web of Affection. Scene. Arjuna's lament grows intimate. He doesn't just speak of kingship, he speaks of people. Bhishma, the grandsire whose lap was a pillow. Drona, whose lessons were arrows of wisdom. To strike them feels like stabbing his own childhood. His words throb with filial love. Then, Draupadi would not weep with him here. She would remind him of insults swallowed, of dignity stripped in silence. Yet Arjuna's memory chooses softer scenes. This is the trap of affection, selective recall. In this moment, kinship binds him tighter than chains. Now, we too replay highlight reels when tough choices arise. We remember only the laughter, not the betrayal, the guidance, not the neglect. Affection edits truth until injustice feels forgivable. That is why toxic bonds endure, because memory defends them. Focus. Love does not mean blindness. To honor relationships is noble, but to excuse wrong in their name is dangerous. See the whole picture, both warmth and wounds, before you let affection dictate your Dharma. Scene 134, When Dharma Feels Cruel. Scene. Arjuna now confronts the cruelest paradox. Those he must fight are not strangers, but the very architects of his values. How can Dharma demand striking down the very hands that once shaped his bowstring? Duty feels like betrayal, justice feels like cruelty. Then, to Bharbrik, this is the Mahabharata's most human knot, when right action wounds those we revere. Even Krishna lets the silence stretch, because quick solutions would dishonor the depth of Arjuna's conflict. Dharma is not always gentle. Sometimes it cuts like a surgeon's blade. Now, leaders, parents, citizens, we all face this. To uphold truth, we may have to oppose our own mentors or elders. Whistleblowers expose their companies, reformers critique their traditions, children question their parents' errors. The pain is real, but silence would be worse. Focus. Dharma is not cruelty, though it can feel cruel. When justice collides with affection, choose the path that sustains the larger good. You may grieve, but grief is temporary, while compromise on truth corrodes for generations. Scene 1.35, The Cracking Bowstring. Scene. Arjuna's voice nearly breaks. He declares he would rather be killed unarmed than strike these men. The Gandiva bow, once the symbol of his destiny, now feels cursed in his grip. His warrior's pride dissolves into raw despair. Then, Abhimanyu, if watching, would ache. For a son to see his father's weapon falter is to see the sun dim at noon. Yet this moment matters. Heroes are not born from invincible fathers, but from fathers who dared to wrestle with fear. Krishna waits, knowing the collapse is a necessary prelude to surrender. Now, we too have moments when the tools of our trade feel alien. The surgeon cannot lift the scalpel, the teacher cannot open the book, the leader cannot sign the order. Our identity itself trembles, and sometimes letting it crack is the first step to wisdom. Focus. Don't fear the breaking point. When your bow feels unbearable, allow yourself the honesty of collapse. It is in the fragments that new strength and sometimes divine guidance can enter. Scene 1.36, The Burden of Sin. Then, Arjuna now voices a deeper fear, sin. It is not just about killing family, it is about staining the soul. He asks, even if they, blinded by greed, see no wrong in destroying kin, Should we, who know better, fall to the same blindness? His vision is not limited to death on the battlefield. He sees ripples that reach into eternity. Killing Bhishma would not just break his heart, it would curse his lineage. Killing Drona would not just end a teacher's life, it would dishonor the sacred bond of guru and disciple. In that moment, Arjuna becomes not just a warrior, but a moral philosopher. His cry echoes through Draupadi's pain, who was humiliated by those very kin he now defends. His doubt mirrors the silent questions of Abhimanyu and Barbaric, unborn or unready, yet bound to the war's cycle of sacrifice. The battlefield becomes a cosmic court where Dharma, karma, and love collide. Now, we too wrestle with the same burden. A CEO who knows that layoffs will save profits but ruin hundreds of families. A doctor who chooses one patient over another due to limited resources. Even in smaller choices, buying cheap goods at the cost of exploiting workers, the shadow of sin lingers. Arjuna's hesitation shows us the cost of knowing better. When conscience awakens, the weight doubles, for ignorance cannot shield us. Focus. The greatest wars are not on battlefields, but within the conscience. To act with awareness is to carry the heaviest responsibility. Scene 137, the family in flames. Then, Arjuna continues, if we kill our kin, the family collapses. He foresees not just physical death, but social ruin. Without fathers, brothers, and elders, who will guide the young? Without sons, who will carry forward traditions? The entire house of Kuru seems to him like a torch about to burn itself down. He sees widows wailing, children fatherless, rites unperformed, ancestors left restless. This is more than sentiment, it is vision. Arjuna, once the fiercest warrior, suddenly becomes the tender protector of social fabric. He knows that wars are not fought by soldiers alone. They scar mothers like Kuntes, wives like Draupad, children like Abhimanyu. In his trembling words, one hears the lament of every woman who watched her home crumble in war. Now, modern wars, corporate rivalries, or even family disputes echo the same truth. A bitter divorce can leave children adrift. Political feuds can split societies for generations. Even workplace battles can ruin trust and culture. Arjuna reminds us that when we act out of vengeance or greed, it is not just the opponent who suffers. It is the very fabric of family, society, and community that burns. Focus. Before striking, remember, destruction spreads beyond the battlefield. Protect the roots, not just the branches. Scene at 1.38, Dharma in decline. Then, Arjuna's voice rises in anguish. When family is destroyed, Dharma perishes, and when Dharma is lost, unrighteousness overwhelms the whole clan. He is not thinking of himself anymore. He is thinking of cosmic order. Family is not just blood, it is the vessel of tradition, ritual, and sacred law. Without it, children grow without guidance, elders die without rights, women suffer dishonor, and society forgets its very soul. Here, Arjuna touches on the deepest Indian philosophy, that the decline of Dharma is not just a social failure, but a cosmic imbalance. Without Dharma, the wheel of karma spins wildly. Even Barbaric, destined to witness the aftermath with his 3 arrows, becomes a silent testament to this fear. War consumes righteousness faster than it consumes men. Draupad's humiliation, which ignited the conflict, itself becomes a symbol of Dharma slipping through trembling hands. Now, we see the same today. When families weaken, values blur. When greed overtakes duty, corruption spreads. When Dharma declines, injustice becomes normal. Arjuna's fear of adharma rising is the same fear we whisper when we see violence on streets, broken trust in politics, or children adrift without moral compass. Focus. The strength of society lies in its Dharma. Protect it not only through laws, but through living values in daily life. Scene. The battlefield grows silent as Krishna draws Arjuna's chariot into the space between the 2 armies. What follows is not the clash of weapons, but the trembling of a warrior's heart. Arjuna lifts his gaze and sees not enemies, but faces of love. Bhishma, the grandsire who once sheltered him. Drona, the teacher who shaped his bow. Cousins, brothers, nephews, even children too young to hold weapons. In that instant, Kurukshetra transforms into a graveyard before the first arrow is loosed. Gandiva, the bow that never failed, slips from his hands. He begins to question. What is victory without family? What is a throne if it is won by destroying the very people it was meant to protect? He imagines widows weeping, children left without guidance, sacred rituals fading, ancestors forgotten. He fears not just death, but the collapse of Dharma itself, the unraveling of society's moral fabric. This is not cowardice, but clarity. Arjuna realizes that war, no matter how righteous its cause, brings consequences that echo across generations. The greatest warrior of his age suddenly trembles under the weight of compassion. Yet his silence is not his alone. Draupad, waiting for justice after her humiliation, watches his hesitation with anguish. Abhimanyu, young and radiant, stands on the edge of a destiny that will consume him. Barbaric, with his 3 arrows, already senses a battlefield where no side will emerge untouched. Arjuna's dilemma is theirs too, and by extension, humanity's. Now, centuries later, Arjuna's voice still speaks within us. We may not hold a bow, but we too face Kurukshetras of our own. A leader may ask, is profit worth the destruction of families? A policymaker may wonder, should I make decisions that benefit some but devastate others? Even within our homes, arguments escalate into divisions, leaving us questioning if victory is worth the loss of love. Arjuna's warning that adharma rises when dharma falls is not history. It is prophecy. When families weaken, society weakens. When greed overrides conscience, justice collapses. When values are forgotten, even success feels hollow. His trembling is a mirror of our own hesitation before making choices that will shape lives beyond our own. And so, at the end of these verses, Arjuna collapses, laying aside his bow. The strongest warrior is undone not by fear of death, but by the weight of love, duty, and despair. His surrender opens the doorway for Krishna's wisdom to enter. Closing. Then, on Kurukshetra, Arjuna's arms weakened, his bow slipped, and his heart sank. He saw a war not of kingdoms, but of families torn apart. He feared the collapse of Dharma and the emptiness of victory bought with blood. His silence was the pause before divine wisdom was spoken. Now, we too face crossroads where every choice carries unseen costs. Careers, politics, relationships, all ask, is victory worth the loss? Like Arjuna, we hesitate, not out of weakness, but because conscience demands clarity. Our modern Kurukshetras may not resound with conch shells, but they echo with moral confusion. Focus. The lesson is timeless. Pause before action. Ask not just, can I win, but what will endure if I do? Arjuna's despair was the beginning of transformation. Our own hesitation can be the moment when higher wisdom enters.